live and alert on the north side of the dirt. It is your man D-Real coming at you with another Be Real with D-Real. Where? Edutainment is what I do, y'all. Hey, I'm more than just a little bit giddy. And if you watched the AFC Championship game last night, you can understand why. We going to the Super Bowl. Give it up, or don't give it up. If you're a Philly fan, I don't expect you to give it up for the Kansas City Chiefs. Everybody else, though, everybody in the AFC, gotta give it up. Did what we set out to do. But that is not what this video is all about. It is your weekly review of The Last of Us. And this was a pretty different episode. Set a whole entirely different tone opposed to what we are used to seeing. And I'm going to get into it, and I'm going to try not to take too terribly long. But before I do, I need y'all to do what y'all always do for me. Comment, like, subscribe, and share the Be Real with D-Real page so that when new material comes out, y'all get it. If you're digging what a brother's shoveling, put some dirt in my bucket. Comment, like, subscribe, and share the page. Now, if you've been watching The Last of Us, you know that in last week's episode, Tess sacrificed her life so that Joel and Ellie could continue on the journey of trying to get her to the West Coast so they can possibly synthesize the cure for the infection, for the pandemic that is currently in her bloodstream because she is immune to the effects of the cordyceps. She has been bitten by infected and she has not turned. She's been bitten more than once and has not turned. And that part of it so far lines up at least with the first video game. Now, what happens when we join them? Ellie and Joel are out in the woods. They're eating, surviving. And, Joel lets her know, all right, it's time for us to roll. She wants a gun. Bear in mind, she wants a gun. Joel doesn't even entertain the idea of her having a gun. You would think in a situation like that, Joel would want her to have a gun in case they run up against anything and she needs to defend herself. But Joel barely can stand her, let alone have a burning desire to protect her and help her protect herself. I think Joel's motivations are self-serving. I just want the pandemic to be over so I can get back to having a normal life, if that's even possible at this point. After what, 20-something years? 20 years. Anyway, they run into this old store on one of their journeys, and Joel says we need to go in because I stashed some stuff here. And they go into this little store and they're looking around. The shelves are kind of empty, and Ellie finds a little trap door that goes into an underneath the store compartment, a basement area of sorts, if you will. And the building looks to have sustained some kind of damage. Some of the walls were not in the best of condition, and it looked like some stuff had caved in. Okay, so when she gets down here, of course, she finds an infected, and we already know from the first episode of Ellie watching Joel beat the crap out of a guy. She's got this penchant or this hard on for violence. And so this infected who's trapped under rubble and can't get to her, she goes over to it and she starts, kind of messing with it. She pulls out her knife and cuts it, and you can see the cordyceps in his forehead, and then she just like stabs him. Joel can't find nothing. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we're whisked into a flashback because they're outside and they're looking at these bones. And Joel is asking her, about the history. Do you know the history of what happened here? And one of the parts of what goes on is when there are quarantine zones where people can be safe, you can only have so many people in these quarantine zones. And when there aren't enough people in these quarantine zones, the government takes the remainder of people out and shoots them. Yeah, because dead people can't be infected. So we see the skeleton of this woman and her baby, and then the flashback begins with this woman and this baby on this truck that the government has loaded up and sent them on their way, marked a big X on this house, and they leave. But little do they know, there is a survivalist by the name of Frank under that house that is like, he ain't getting took nowhere. He's a survivalist, so he's going to survive. And Frank, by the way, is played by the one and only Nick Offerman. So Frank's doing some doomsday prepping. He's staying in his town. He like, bump y'all, I'm staying right here. And he goes down to the power company and he turns the power back on. He go, so he's got gas so he can cook, so he can have lights, electricity, all of that. And then he sets up a perimeter around his home with all kinds of booby traps and trip wires and all kinds of things all around it. And he loaded for bear. And he's got meals and he's growing food and he's got supplies and he's got a truck and he's got a boat. He's got a nice truck and he's got a nice boat. And for being in a pandemic, Frank is living pretty good. So one day when Frank's out, bear in mind, 2003. So one day when Frank's out, one of his non-lethal traps outside of the perimeter has captured someone. Now, this gentleman, by the name of, I'm sorry, his name's Bill. Bill finds Frank in the hole. There we go. Long story short, gets him out, doesn't trust him at first, but slowly and surely, they become lovers? Didn't see that one coming. So these two middle-aged men who are hairy and dad bod shaped, well, at least one of them is, fall into a very, very committed relationship. I mean, the options are rare, but Frank is more like the optimist of the couple. Bill he don't want nobody coming around. He want to kill everybody. He worried about raiders. He's worried about infected. He's focused on all of that. But now that he's got Frank in his life, he's mellowed out a little bit. And strangely enough, Frank's like, we want to meet people. I want to meet people. I want us to have neighbors because they got a ham radio and all of that, so they can reach out and communicate with people. And who do they reach out and communicate with? Joe and Tess. And so sort of an alliance is formed. What they have, they trade with Joel and Tess, and what Joel and Tess have, they trade with Bill and Frank. And what they can't get, they just, they kind of barter, that sort of a thing. And they have a nice little relationship. And at some point in the relationship, 20 years later, in 2023, Frank is dying. Frank's in a wheelchair. Frank has to take meds, and I believe he has cancer, is what it is. And ultimately, they end up at first Frank decides he wants to take a whole bunch of pills and die because he feels like he's lived a full life. He's happy. He's had a wonderful life. His life with Bill and Frank together, they've just been like peas and carrots. Everything's great. But Bill and Frank eventually decide on a mutually agreeable solution, which is because they love each other so much, they're going to die together. They're going to commit suicide together. And they do. Later on, Joel and Ellie come to visit Bill and Frank, find out they're dead. Oh, well, y'all don't need this truck no more. So we're going to take this truck and roll the hell out. And that essentially, forgot to tell you, while they're rummaging through Bill and Frank's house, Ellie finds a gun. Now she's packing and strapping. So that essentially is episode 3 of The Last of Us. It's getting interesting because I guarantee you that absolutely was not what we expected episode 3 to be about. Because there's a situation during that episode where some raiders do come and Bill is out there shooting it out with them. You know what I mean? And the booby traps and the trip wires are going off, and Muggs is getting burnt up and eviscerated. My man Bill set some good ass traps because there was a gang of folks coming to get him, and obviously they didn't because they lived until 2023. Bill got wounded, but Frank came and got him and walked him on back into the house and nursed him back to health. They were really quite the couple. They was ride or die for each other, literally. But yeah, that was episode 3 of The Last of Us. Have you been watching The Last of Us? Have you been watching my recaps of The Last of Us? You should be. And if you are, they should be inspiring you to watch The Last of Us on HBO Max on Sunday nights. That's it for now. But I will be coming at you with another one of them other ones. And until I do, y'all be good. Go Chiefs!